Despite the Kremlin's loud pronouncements about nuclear weapons and war with Europe, the real room for maneuver for Russian dictator and war criminal Vladimir Putin has significantly narrowed. Alexander Morozov, political philosopher, lecturer at Charles University in Prague, and director of the Free Russia Institute, explained this in an interview with Glavred. Putin can't continue nuclear escalation. Its potential has largely been exhausted. No one is afraid, not even those responsible for security on the continent. The nuclear threat is effective when it's waved very rarely and with great force. But if you constantly shout, "We'll cover everyone in nuclear ash," adaptation gradually occurs, he said. Morozov noted that Putin lacks the capacity to open a second front due to a lack of necessary military resources. He added that the protracted nature of the war against Ukraine is itself explained by Russia's limited ability to quickly replenish its weapons stockpiles, particularly shells and missiles, which are quickly expended. He also emphasized that the Kremlin cannot ignore Russia's lag in drone technology compared to Ukraine. Experts estimate that Russia is approximately a year behind in drone development, while Ukraine is actively strengthening cooperation with Germany and other countries not only in drone production but also in control systems. Against this backdrop, as Morozov emphasizes, the Kremlin is aware of the technological lag and the time required to overcome it, which makes the idea of a second front unlikely. All these familiar assumptions no longer hold up very well. I would put it this way: the paradoxical situation is that Putin has no momentum. I think it was written all over his face on May 9. He was rather gloomy, he lacked the energy to deliver a fiery speech, and it was unclear what the point of this fiery fervor was. He was essentially forced to minimize the presence of his beloved long-range missiles at the parade, and the presence of his equipment in general. I think, as a result, he will be at the mercy of inertia. The political system is cracking now, it's obvious. And he has no glue to fill this gap and fix it. It will slowly widen, he noted. The political philosopher also noted that the key question is not so much Putin's future actions as the readiness of various international players to respond to the possible deepening of internal cracks in the Russian system. In his opinion, Ukraine will have to develop a new political strategy, different from the approaches taken during the first years of the war, if Putin's regime weakens. He believes that the European Union and individual European states will also have to work on similar changes in approach. Alexander Morozov, head of the Free Russia Institute, noted that the first years of the full-scale war shaped a fairly established logic of perceiving the conflict. Russia is the aggressor, Ukraine is resisting, and Western states support Kiev. According to him, this model allowed for the construction of a clear political and analytical framework within which it was believed that the Putin regime was a stable and long-term phenomenon with which one simply needed to learn to interact. But if any momentum begins to build, many questions arise. Who should we deal with in Russia? Can we trust these people? Clearly, we can't. Politics in this situation doesn't presuppose trust. But we still need to deal. And if we do deal with them, who should do it? Who are the people who will work with these Russians? What steps can we take toward Russia to prevent this gap from being filled with glue, but rather, to widen it, he emphasized. Moreover, in his opinion, if Russia experiences not democratic changes, but a gradual internal reformatting, when a so-called peace party begins to strengthen within the system, international players will be faced with the question of revising their approaches and the consistency of their policies towards the Russian Federation. What should we do about this? Dismiss it, have nothing to do with it, or support this party in some way? This is a broad range of questions. I think this will begin to be discussed in Europe as early as the end of May, at the Summit of Foreign Ministers, where, as we hear, a possible EU strategy will be discussed for the first time if Putin fails to escalate further and continues to slide down the mountain. Then a whole host of questions will arise, he concluded. Recall, since coming to power in 2000, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has built one of the most repressive and effective dictatorships in the world. That process accelerated sharply after his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, when, increasingly paranoid about his society's reaction to the wisdom of that war, Putin cracked down on all internal dissent. He chased out the last remnants of independent media, shut down civil society organizations that were even mildly critical of his war. He accompanied this destruction of independent organizations and leaders with a comprehensive propaganda campaign to maintain support for his war and his regime. Tragically, Putin's strategy for strengthening dictatorship after launching his full-scale invasion has worked, at least so far. But lately, there are some signs that cracks in the autocratic regime may be emerging. Putin is failing to achieve his important objectives. When dictators fail, they create opportunities for change. We know from studies of past collapses of autocratic rule that losing wars and poorly performing economies are often precipitants of political change. Even in Russian history, these two factors have triggered revolutionary change. The Russian Empire crumbled in 1917 in part as a result of an unpopular and unsuccessful war, World War I. The Soviet Union fell apart in part because of a stagnant economy. In Putin's Russia, there are parallels to both. First, Putin's biggest failure is his war in Ukraine. After launching his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Putin has failed to achieve any of the military objectives that he himself articulated back in 2022. Despite waging a war that has now lasted longer than the Soviet Union's war with Nazi Germany, Putin has not conquered or subjugated all of Ukraine. He has not achieved denazification, his grotesque euphemism for regime change. The democratically elected president and parliament of Ukraine remain in power. He has failed dramatically at demilitarizing Ukraine, which is today more militarized than ever in its history. And he has failed to stop NATO expansion, with two powerful countries, Finland and Sweden, joining the alliance because of his war, and NATO ties to Ukraine are now deeper than ever before. It is hard to say how much knowledge Russian citizens have about these failures. But the scale of Russian casualties means that everyone knows someone who has lost a loved one in this war. And without question, elites know about the absence of success on the battlefield. Splits within the ruling elite are often the first move in the transition from autocratic rule. Increasingly, even the war's cheerleaders are openly discussing these failures in the Russian media. The lack of success on the battlefield has undermined Putin's aura of invincibility. Like autocrats in other countries, including Soviet leaders during their war in Afghanistan, Putin's overreach in Ukraine is eroding political stability back home. Second, the human cost of achieving Putin's very limited war objectives has been extremely high. Accurate reporting on Russian casualties in this war is hard to find, but exiled outlet Mediazona and BBC Russian have managed to confirm the deaths of 216,205 Russian soldiers since 2022, including more than 8,600 in April alone. The true death toll is almost certainly higher. A size report from January 2026 estimates that 325,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in Ukraine, with a further 875,000 wounded or missing. Third, the Russian economy is stagnating, adding to mounting pressure at home. Economist Vladimir Milov warned earlier this year of an unholy trinity of recession, inflation, and budgetary crisis coming together in 2026, predicting that this year would be the hardest for Russia since the war began. Rising oil and gas prices, driven by Trump's war against Iran, have provided a temporary economic lifeline for the Kremlin. In March 2026, Russian companies earned $19 billion from oil exports, nearly double what they took in the month before. But few expect these short-term windfalls to offset Russia's long-term economic structural challenges. Russia's military-industrial complex is eating up too many resources. The private sector is dying, in part because of international sanctions. Hundreds of thousands of Russia's best and brightest have left the country. And Russia's long-term demographic challenges, already acute before the 2022 full-scale invasion, have become even more dire because so many young lives are being lost on the battlefield. Perhaps to control criticism of these military failures and economic challenges, Putin recently has introduced even more draconian measures to reduce the flow of information inside Russia. Among the most notable targets is Telegram, Russia's most popular social media platform. It also happens to be the preferred platform of Russia's military bloggers, who often post more candid accounts of the war in Ukraine than those found in state media. The indiscriminate nature of the internet crackdown has prompted criticism from across the political spectrum. Even those in positions of power appear concerned by the online restrictions.